The following BLTV program is brought to you by O'Flaherty Law. Please enjoy.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the OnPurpose Growth podcast. As always, I'm your host, Bryan McDonald, partner at OnPurpose Growth. And today, I've got David Hassell of 15.5 on, and we're going to be talking about something we have yet to talk about on the podcast. And what that is employee performance. And David's an expert at this and an expert in this genre. So, David, I'm excited to have you on. I appreciate you coming on, man. How about you give everybody a little background intro of who you are and what your expertise is?
Absolutely. Thanks, Bryan. It's great to be here. So I'm David Hassell. I'm the CEO of a company called 15.5, and we build employee performance management software. We call it continuous performance management software. Ironically, I actually get up on stages and tell companies and leaders they shouldn't actually do performance management, which is odd when that's what you're selling. And usually they get a little bit curious about why that is. And where I'll go with that is I explain that performance is actually a byproduct, right? It's the result of focusing on other things. And what I believe is the things that we've historically been focused on in terms of performance, they work, but they're not the highest leverage things. And we'll get into exactly what that is in a little bit. So my whole kind of passion and reason for being, and the reason we've created 15.5 is to explore the what's possible in terms of human potential in the workplace and how to create extraordinary workplaces with uncommonly high performance, uncommon loyalty, amazing results, and actually have a great environment and have a good time while you're doing it. So we've done that for ourselves at 15.5. So just this year alone, we grew from 70 to 185 people.
Wow.
We maintained a 5-star rating on Glassdoor with nearly 80 reviews. I'm not sure I've actually seen a company do that. We've only had 5 people voluntarily leave the company ever in the company's history. And what's cool about that is only 2 went to other jobs. We had one guy decide he wanted to go around the world surfing for a year and a half. And I'm told he's getting to the end, he wants his job back.
Yeah.
One woman followed her lifetime dream to open a cafe, and another woman decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. So we're kind of like, we've created something really unusual. Now, we also have very high standards. We do let people go when they're not performing. That's part of being a high-performance business. But the people we want to stay. And the thing I'm most proud of is that 97% of our employees reported that they believe they're better versions of themselves for having worked at our company.
Whoa.
And that in and of itself is the secret, I believe, to the success, the retention, the performance, the great reviews, because that's essentially espouses what we are out talking about and teaching, which counter to performance management, we call it best self-management.
Okay.
And the idea that when you create an environment that supports people in being and becoming their best selves, then all the good stuff happens. You get high performance, you get loyalty, but you also get an organization where you don't have any of the BS that permeates most companies: drama, politics, resentment, blame. All that stuff is the norm. And if you don't intentionally design a company and a culture and an environment to counteract that, that's what you're going to get. That's just the human condition, unfortunately. And so we've been trying to figure that out from a manager-employee perspective, from an organizational culture perspective, and like, what are the things that actually matter in creating this kind of environment? So I feel like we're a bit of like, kind of crazy scientists out in the lab, using our company as the lab, yeah, right. And then trying to bottle that up, productize it, and sell it.
Yeah. Well, that's great, because you're not just a talking head. You actually are what you preach. And that's what I love about this is this is not theoretical. You're doing it. And I love that. So how did you get here? Where did you come from to start something like 15.5 in this, I would say, narrative in the workforce?
I've had a very unusual entrepreneurial journey. So I was clear pretty early in my life that I wanted to go out and just create things. There were aspects of that in high school and college and whatnot. Even still, when I graduated college in 1998, I went to join a big consulting company because they recruited me from college. They offered a nice salary. I didn't have any business ideas at the time, and certainly didn't think I was ready to do that. So I said, oh, I'll go work for this company. Maybe I'll learn some things. I was surprised at how quickly I left. It was within, I got 2 raises in the first 10 months I was there because I was a high performer. But they didn't really create this in culture that was very inspiring. I often would say, like, I'm living in beige cubicle land, in this windowless office, and like this can't be my life. I'm working from 9 a.m. till 7 p.m. I don't even see the sun. So as a 23-year-old kid, I was kind of not too thrilled about that. I asked them to send me on a project. They sent me to I was in New Jersey. They sent me to Denver, and I was enjoying the travel in that aspect. But again, still wasn't very engaged in the work. I met a co-founder, my co-founder of my first company, on that job, and we started an ad tech company in New York City in 1999 at the height of the dot-com boom, right before the big bust. And I knew nothing about culture, values, the importance of what we now call in 15.5 relational mastery, which is the very high order relating skills that human beings don't generally learn from society or their families or school. When you learn them, they're like, it's like superpowers in terms of creating a cohesive team. I didn't know anything about that. And I actually went into business with a guy who had very different values than I did. And I didn't even understand it, why we had like kind of just things that didn't quite work in the company, until I read an article 5 years later in Inc. magazine that said, you can't have 2 different cultures in the same company. And I realized that's what had happened. I had my little culture with my team, which was kind of operations and engineering, and he had his culture with his team. And that kind of brought out the idea of like, oh, these values are important. Started listening to Tony Hsieh talk about how he screwed up his first company by not understanding that, and then did it great with Zappos. This is like 2006.
Yeah, right.
And light bulbs started to go off. Now, I was a little burned out by the end of that journey after 7 years, and I went with a couple of friends, started an adventure travel company in Northeast Brazil for kite surfers. And I lived on the beach. I bought a dune buggy. I was kite surfing every day. It was fantastic.
Wow.
It was really, really fantastic. I'm glad I had that chapter in my life.
Yeah, right? I'm jealous.
It really was amazing. And who knew that would actually parlay into moving to Silicon Valley and like getting connected to this incredible group of entrepreneurs and venture capitalists who were all kite surfers. And later ending up on Richard Branson's Necker Island with that group a couple of years ago. So that, you never know where life's going to take you. That wasn't the angle I was going for, right?
Right.
Beach and kite surf. But, a couple of years into that, I kind of said it was like a hobby business. It was a break from this big 7-year building this thing that didn't work out. And I like to joke that my first company, I was chasing the money, but there was no passion. My second business, it was all about the passion, but there was no money. And then I had this aha and said, I wonder if I could have both of those. Right?
Yeah.
So that really was the inspiration between like having that aha, like, can I combine, the profit pursuit with the passion pursuit? Do something that inherently is meaningful, purposeful, and fulfilling in the process. I connected with a guy named Simon Sinek a couple of years before he became pretty famous.
Oh, really?
Back in 2007. So he's one of our advisors and investors.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and Simon turned me on to the concept of why, and I was actually almost moved to tears. This is like 2 years before his TED Talk. I was almost moved to tears in the audience, and I said, "Oh my God, this is something here." Started to think in terms of what is my why, what's the purpose, and looking back through my own life about how I had continually reinvented myself through my life in my own quest to become my best self. So that was always there, and when we started 15.5, the question was, what if we created an organization whose sole purpose was unlocking our team's potential? And whose product was the sole purpose was unlocking the potential of our customers' teams? And wouldn't that lead to high performance, uncommonly high performance and loyalty? That was the hypothesis. So now I can tell you 8 years later that we've proven out the hypothesis. It's working at scale at 15.5. And our product is continuing to move toward the direction where we can reliably deliver that to our customers through a combination of context, education, and product. So that's been my journey thus far.
That's great. It's ironic you bring up Simon Sinek with a group of entrepreneurs that I meet with on a weekly basis. We just watched his talk, I don't know where it was, on the infinite game.
Yes.
It sounds like you're playing that.
I love it. We are, and it's so cool because we're actually going to be doing our first Best Self conference in May. I'm not sure we've announced it, but he is headlining.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
So I don't know if I'm spilling the beans. Sorry, marketing team.
Oh yeah, right.
It's a small invite-only gathering.
Yeah.
200 people, and he's going to be giving us, that download on the Infinite Game. I've talked to him a bit about it as well.
That's
and
cool.
I love the reframe of, kind of competitors whose goal is to beat your competitors, to seeing your worthy adversaries. That's been really great for us internally as we look out and being in a very, very hot market where there's just really good, high-performing companies out there doing similar things with a different angle. And everything else, I think that when I heard the rules of the Infinite Game, I said, "Oh my God, we're doing all this. This is great." And I think the one thing that helped me shift that we weren't doing as well, it's not like we were trying to beat our competitors, but I would sometimes experience more fear of like, "Oh, we're getting beat and we need to do this." And then that helped me reframe of looking out in the world and saying, "Wow, look, they're outperforming us in this area. We're clearly outperforming in this area, but it's exposing a weakness. How can we then become our best selves and improve that weakness where we need to?"
And it seems like that just plays into what you do. It's like this, when I hear you say that, it just literally plays into the best self and whatnot. So, well, so you're an expert on employee performance. So, and you alluded to in the beginning, you actually do talks and tell people not to even focus on that. So what problems do organizations face when it comes to that in today's marketplace?
I think the first thing, and this is a great lesson from Simon Sinek, is that companies, first and foremost, they don't focus on creating an environment that is intrinsically motivated for the individual. I can't tell you how many friends I've had who have been in various entrepreneur groups over the years who became entrepreneurs because they didn't feel inspired or connected or intrinsically motivated by working for someone else. They wanted to wake up in the morning and feel like, I'm just really excited to go do what I do, right? And they thought the only path to get there was to leave a company and start a business. And so I started asking the question, well, where does that leave most people? Like, that's a sad experience if we're not delivering that for most people. And I said, well, what if we created organizations where everybody felt that way? And so I started studying intrinsic motivation. And Dan Pink wrote a book called Drive. And he looked at some great research and said there were 3 keys to intrinsic motivation. You need to create an environment where people have a sense of autonomy, where they have freedom to go out and do the work. You give them the goals, but they have the freedom to go figure out how to do it. They have a chance to develop mastery, which is the always getting better, right? An opportunity to find their strengths and get better and whatnot. And then probably the most important, which a lot of companies miss, even though Simon Sinek's TED Talk's been watched 50 million times.
Yeah, right.
Is the purpose, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, connection to something bigger than themselves that they're inspired to create, where the money's important, but it's not the main reason they're being at the organization. And then there's another woman out of Harvard who also mentioned, who found similar research. They had 2 of the same elements, but she also added, I think it was membership. Or relationship. So relating with other people. So when we call it the ramp, the intrinsic motivation ramp, when you have the right relationships, people are connected to their peers and they feel tightly bonded, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That creates that environment for intrinsic motivation. Then on the other side, if you look at what Maslow taught, that we all have these kind of fundamental human needs that build upon each other, from our physiology to safety, which is physical and emotional safety, a sense of belonging and esteem. Most organizations are creating environments where they're just providing the physiology, like we have bathrooms and doors and desks, right? And safety. No one's going to come in here and kill you. We might have a security guard. Right. But they don't focus on the belonging and esteem. And it turns out that if any of those fundamental needs are not being met, we go into fear and self-preservation mode. So if I don't feel like I belong, there's a part of my brain that's like, I have to protect myself. Wow. If I don't feel like I have high self-esteem, I'm going to be self-obsessed and try to put on a front. And so what happens is I'm trying to CYA, right? Cover your A. And I'm trying to make sure I preserve my job. And all of that spins out into drama and politics and blame and resentment and all these things happen. And if companies create environments where they create a high sense of belonging and help people identify their strengths and move toward that in their roles, that takes care of the esteem bucket. People move into this place, what I call above the, kind of above those needs, into this, what Maslow said was self-actualization. We call it best self, but it's this virtuous cycle of growth and contribution. You feel self-assured and safe. You can take risks, and you're just going to want to continue to grow and contribute because you're in this amazing environment where you get to do this together. And by the way, you also get paid. So going back to the most important thing in the question was that a lot of companies are treating their relationship with their employees very transactionally. Like, okay, I'm going to pay you this, and you're going to give me this, and I'm going to treat you like a cog in my machine. And if you don't work, I'm going to throw you out and get another one, which also doesn't create safety when you have that environment where nobody wants to be treated like an asset or a resource. Most companies talk about human resources, or people are our greatest asset. Well, an asset is something that you basically own or control to create value. I don't know anyone wants to be owned or controlled, but, and then a resource is something that you use to transform into something of value that, here's the kicker, that may be consumed or made unavailable in the process.
Oh.
So resources are things we burn up, and assets are things we own or control. Nobody wants to be an asset or a resource. No. And that's how companies they treat their people like line items in the company, parts of a machine, members of the quote army. We use all these input output metaphors, metaphors and war metaphors in business, and we're dehumanizing the people. So when you break all that away and you start to study some of the science, you can shift the organization into one where we're actually coming together with very high standards. I'm not saying like this is all, let's all be lovey-dovey and we're all going to be family. You can have that and have high standards of performance, right? And when you have both of those things together, then that creates the possibility of extraordinarily high engagement and high performance. And then those things like we're going to set goals and hold you to it and create accountability structures actually work the way they're supposed to on top of that.
So in regards to, and I think this is going to my next question about the distinction between employee performance and best self, is the distinction where people actually want to be held accountable. They want to grow. They just aren't in an environment that grows that, if you will, right?
Yes. I think that there's you have to kind of take a dualistic approach that, for example, if think about this, if I had like a pine tree from the Sierras, and I bring that pine tree out here, I'm in Sedona, Arizona, we plant that out in the barren desert out here in the sun, and the tree's not growing very well. What do? Do you yell at the tree?
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, right.
It's like the tree's perfectly fine. It's your freaking environment that's the problem here, right? Yeah. So you've got the wrong ecosystem. So you got to yes, but at the same time, like there are things you have to, in the tree scenario, you're not going to coach the tree.
Yeah, right.
You got to have the environment first, and you got to focus on the individual. There has to be both the nurturance and the pushing, right? We all want to grow. It's innate.
Right.
Maslow figured that out, that like we have an innate drive to grow and develop. The Army caught on to this with their very famous "Be All You Can Be" campaign. That was directly from Maslow.
I didn't know that.
Calling to people's kind of innate sense to be all they could be. And it was very, very effective. And so we all want that, but the problem is when we get caught up with those needs not getting met, and when organizations actually almost create the opposite of what those needs are. They create lack of safety, lack of belonging, and they don't have an orientation to understanding that people have innate strengths and how we can get them to be on an upcycle of developing those. They get into that self-preservation mode. They can never get they're not even connected to that desire to be their best at that point. They're just feeling bad about themselves and unsafe. It's actually, it's the way the brain works. We have this, all the stuff we do in terms of our thinking and our rational thought only happens if the fear centers are calmed down in a positive way. Otherwise, all those rational thoughts are being used to figure out how I can get safe.
Yeah, right.
Frameworks. So if we can calm the limbic system, right, and have people feel safe and belong, and they have a high sense of self-esteem, then people feel more open, creative, passionate, right? And that's where the magic happens. That's where, in this environment now, where it no longer matters how fast you are. Think about this. If you have a writer who you've hired to write on your blog, it doesn't matter how fast they can type on the keyboard in terms of the output. It matters on the inspiration and creativity and the work product, which might take some crafting and time. And so you want someone who's coming from a really good place where they're inspired and they care, because that's going to influence the outcome. Same thing in any creative endeavor, including software development. If you have someone who's just punching the clock and checked out and they don't really like the company, they're not going to really probably take care on making the code quality all that great. They might cut corners here and there because they don't really care about the organization. And then who's left to deal with that? All of those things create drag on the company over time.
Right.
Yeah. So
that's interesting.
Hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah, no, that was phenomenal. I mean, the examples are great because it really crystallizes how people are thinking and need to think, yes. Right? Because this is a mindset adjustment, a change, right? Yes. Maybe some people are far away, some people are close, but this is really about thinking about how to help your employees to get what you want and they want, instead of using your employees to get what you want, right?
That's exactly right. It's having companies win because they're supporting their employees thriving, not at the expense of them, and the ability to win is actually increased in the former, when you're actually creating an environment where people are, like, all of your employees are trying to get better, right? And when those needs are met, they want to grow. And what creates growth is being a little bit out of your comfort zone. So you do need to help people create goals that push them a little bit further than what they're comfortable with, that move into a state of stress. A lot of people talk about stress being bad,
right?
And it's actually that's actually a dangerous concept, because not all stress is bad. Actually, all growth comes from some degree of stress.
Correct.
And so and they talk about distinguishing stress between eustress and distress. So imagine you go to the gym.
Yep.
You're working out, you're using an appropriate amount of weight, you feel really pleasantly sore afterwards. That's eustress. Your muscles are going to repair and grow back stronger. You go in there and load up the plates like 2 times heavier than you've ever done. You try to lift and you pop a tendon. That's distress.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Right? So you want to give people enough of a push,
yeah.
Right? But without breaking them. And they want that too when it's aligned with, hey, we're going to put you in this structure. We're going to have you go for this. You've got our full support, and you're going to grow in the process. And we're in partnership, right? That's the whole thing, is like, can we create organizations that aren't us versus them, where it's like, the employees have a lot of people talk now, because we have a tight labor market, that now all of a sudden the employees have the balance of power is shifted to the employee.
Oh yeah.
But that's also talking about a balance of power. And we're saying, like, get rid of the power dynamic.
Exactly.
Let's actually have a relationship here where we're in partnership to do something great, where you get to evolve your career and we get to grow our company.
Right. And I love that, because just being in that narrative of the power struggle, it's just a bad narrative, right? You're never going to get, you're never going to get to this end goal being inside of that. You actually have to completely remove it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So, so what can companies do to put in a strategy like this into action?
It takes, I would say first and foremost, it takes a mindset shift,
mm-hmm.
right? I was talking to a guy who was a chief culture officer at a company, and he had said that they'd been acquired, and the CEO there was just all business. He's like, we're not a family. It's just like everything's strictly business. And, you're not performing, you're fired. And he said that it created such a culture of fear. And he felt like, I understand where he's coming from, because he felt like that's his worldview. That's how I need to act as a CEO. not understanding the negative consequences of creating a fear-based organization. Because
Right.
if people are in fear, they can't be connected to their best creativity. They're just not. It's not possible. Great TED Talk by Sean Aker. He talks about, it's got a great 10 or 15 minute TED Talk on positive psychology, and talks about when your brain is at positive versus negative, neutral, or stressed, all of the incredible outcomes in productivity, creativity, intelligence, and all that. So it just doesn't work to be leading a high-performing organization. Well, I shouldn't say that. You can get performance over the short term with fear, for sure.
Right, for sure.
It happens. There are companies out there that are doing quite well. They have a good competitive advantage, and they can be fear-based, and they don't have to make that shift. But if your product and services rely on your customers interacting with your employees interacting with your customers in a really positive way, being really innovative and creative, you're going to be far more successful if you are operating from what I call above the line, which is from trust than from fear, which would be below the line.
Yeah.
Another tip on that, if you go to conscious.is, the Conscious Leadership Group has a really great model on thinking about locating yourself as above or below the line from a leadership perspective.
Really?
So, yeah.
I actually read that in the Oz Principle. Do you ever read the Oz Principle?
I have heard about that. Yes. I'm not sure I've read that, but
And they talk about, radical accountability. I guess in a different context. They talk about above the line's radical accountability. Below the line is opposite, blame, excuses, things like that.
It's exactly the same, actually. Yes. That's
really?
Right. Yeah, because to go from below the line to above the line, you have to take responsibility. That's the trick.
Correct.
And when you take 100% responsibility, you move into that space of life happening. They say when you're below the line, life is happening to you. There's a problem. It's somebody's fault. It might be your own. Something has to get fixed. There's something wrong, right? And you're in the drama triangle.
Yeah. Yep.
You're the hero. When you take responsibility, you move to life happens by me. I'm now at choice and I'm causing this. And, and again, like you said, radical accountability. That's one of the things. It's people don't know this, but it's most of the world lives below the line most of the time, unfortunately.
And it's just they don't know it. Yeah, I did that's
right. They don't know it.
They don't know it, right? I don't really take a negative look at it. They just don't know it, and it's this narrative. I just did this week. I did a talk at a mid-market, like a half-day session at a mid-market manufacturer here, and it was all on promise management and agreements. And I had two people come up. It was our leadership team. I had two people come up, and I asked them, so these two people getting into an agreement, and one person breaks it. Whose responsibility is it? And everybody said the person that broke it. I said, no, it's both 100%. 100. And it was very early on in the talk. And that's how I started it out, because I wanted to, rattle their chain, whatever you want to call it, and get into this conversation so they can start seeing this, because the rest of it depended on them actually seeing that view of the world.
Yes.
It was great.
So what you're getting into here is you would ask, how do you actually put this in practice? So the first is the mindset shift that, all right, I need to take a different style. And what's important is creating an environment where people, are living from above the line. They have good relating skills. We're moving away from that drama and politics. We're creating an organization based on trust versus fear. So there's the desire and the mindset shift. If you can also make the leap to taking on that I'm actually going to genuinely care about my employees as human beings, that will get you about 70% of the way.
Yeah, right.
Honestly. And it's amazing, because from that frame, you're like, okay, I care about my people. Therefore, what's going to be best for them? And in terms of setting them up to win, and to win in my company as employees. Then you got to go study, right? So you got to learn all this stuff about positive psychology, about intrinsic motivation, about purpose, about above the line, below the line, different relating skills. We talk in Best Self Management, we say there are 3 pillars.
Okay.
And pillar number 1 is be and become your best self. It is the individual best self. You got to have practices to support people in assessing them, getting them to understand their strengths, getting peer feedback, setting big goals, etc. But if you just have a bunch of people in the company being their best self, it doesn't get you all the way there, because they're not working in a vacuum. They have to work with other humans.
Yeah.
You also need to cultivate relational mastery. And those are things like locating yourself as below or above the line, being able to shift as necessary, operating in terms of agreements rather than holding expectations about other people. Going 100-100 is like taking 100% responsibility for every interaction. Delivering truth with kindness. So there's a whole bunch of principles, assuming positive intent. It's not always the truth that people have positive intent, but most people assume negative intent. Exactly. And they make up a story about that person, and then, right, they never even address the issue. But if you use this little shortcut of assume positive intent, I might get curious now, ask you, hey, when you said that thing, I felt this, and we could clear that up. It's probably a misunderstanding, because it usually is. So all these relating skills, that's the relational mastery bucket. And then the third one, which ties it all together, is creating a powerful shared context. So that's where the traditional mission, vision, values come in, but it's also our standards, our agreements. It's the level of psychological safety in the organization. It's the level of trust in the organization, and knowing how to create those. So if you focus on, I'll do it in reverse, creating a powerful shared context for the company, right? You've got your purpose, your values, your agreements, your principles, your standards. You support people in learning these relational mastery skills where they can be relating as human beings at a much higher order than the norm. You get rid of all the BS, right? And then you focus on putting in the right structures in for people to be and become their best selves. And we're working on delivering, a roadmap to companies on how to do that. Our first step was we recently launched the Best Self-Management podcast, where we're going in depth into each of these concepts, and you can find that on iTunes. And we're building the both product and educational platform to deliver that to the world on how to actually do this.
Awesome.
More than I can download in just a short podcast.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear you. Well, listen, David, I appreciate you being on. This was phenomenal for me. I definitely learned a lot and reinforced a lot. So I'm grateful for you. So why don't you share with anybody that's listening or watching how they can get a hold of you or learn more about 15.5 if this is something they want to get involved with.
Absolutely. You can find me, David Hassell, all one word, Hassell, there's 2 L's, on LinkedIn, or D Hassell on Twitter. You can follow us at the 15.5 blog. It's just 15.5.com/blog. That's the number 15, 15, and then written out FIVE.com, or 15.5.com/podcast. As I mentioned, one of my co-founders and our chief culture officer, we're having great times just jamming on a lot of these concepts, also bringing in other guests at times on that front. And then just 15.5.com website, you can either sign up for a free trial and play around with the product, which helps managers and employees improve their communication and alignment around goals and one-on-ones and performance reviews, and it's going to be expanding from there. And I'd say that's the gist of it.
Cool. Well, again, thank you. I'm grateful for your time. I know you're very busy, so I know this time was very valuable to you. So I want to thank you again, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in again to this episode of the OnPurpose Growth podcast. Again, I'm Bryan McDonald, partner at OnPurpose Growth, and you can find me on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/McDonald Bryan. And I'm looking forward to seeing you and everybody else back for the next episode. See you guys then. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching our video. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. Click the subscribe button for new videos every week, and download and review us on iTunes. Visit learn-about-law.com for other legal-related articles and videos. Visit our business podcast and video blog, seizeyourbusiness.com, and visit Making Real Estate Fun for real estate videos and podcasts. Call us at 630-324-6666 for a free consultation.